Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Janaramartanam Devaki Paramam Nandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sahanavotu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Mavedvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I salute the Lord Krishna, teacher of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita and world teacher, son of Vasudeva, destroyer of Kamsa, Chanara, supreme bliss of Devaki. May that one protect us both. May he nourish us. May he continue to supply us with great vigor in our work and in our studies. May we not cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we are continuing our study of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and last week we were continuing with some stanzas on some virtues that have to be cultivated. So just to brief us or refresh our memories, 13th chapter is a wonderful chapter, not only because it contains all the principles that we require at the very highest philosophical level, but also provides us great, great subject matter for meditation, dividing everything into three parts: the field, the knower of the field, and the act of knowledge. This we covered last week. When we talk about knowledge, normally we think of scientific knowledge or knowledge of our surroundings, or knowledge of activities in the workplace, skills-based, or education. Education in the sense of filling our heads with some information that may well be useful for us in future citizen life. But the kind of knowledge that we also require for students will be character building as well, how to make people good citizens. And what is the merit of that? Is it just for good citizenry, just to make our social environment comfortable? Or is there some other aspect to it? Well, Vedanta tells us that there is a very deep and profound purpose in our life, namely to discover our own inner essence, what religion calls God. In the language that the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita expresses, it's called knower, the thing that knows. Knower of what? Knower of the field. The field is used in three different senses. Firstly, we can see that everybody seems to have a field, since the field is described as your body. But it's not quite as simple as that. Because this body made from food, we are told in the Taittiriya Upanishad, there are other bodies also. So there is a subtle body, Sukshma Sharira, there's a causal body. Other bodies are there, present, not just the one. In fact, Taittiriya Upanishad tells us that there are 5 sheaths. So Pancha Kosha, 5. And these fives, therefore, these 5 sheaths are like Russian dolls, one fitted into the other, and is useful for meditation to go within and strip away, as it were, the ephemeral nature of each one of these sheaths. The whole thing comprises a field. This is the individual field. But then you see, these are multiple fields. When we look at the outside world, we find all these various activities and multifarious things and beings, and this is a field. And one unit is an observer of it. But that unit may be called the eyes, let's say the senses. Let's say we are focused on something that is seen. But the eyeball also represents to us a field. The senses can be observed, whether they're in a healthy condition, whether they're not. The body itself can be observed as to whether the body is feeling this way or that way, whether it's feeling in good health or energetic or dull. And then thank goodness for that, because we're able to register how we're feeling, and then unfortunately or unfortunately go to a doctor or something. But then the mental health is another aspect. It represents for us another field, a field possibly of good things, joyful things, memories, valuable things, noble things, noble values, as well as pleasant thoughts. But it also can contain unpleasant thoughts, unpleasant memories. It can find traces of trauma. It can see that there are fearful situations, doubtful situations. All of these can arise in the mind, and all of them can be observed by what? So there is a kind of witness, like a kind of military person, like a general, inspecting troops before him and seeing how they march along. He's reviewing them. He's not marching with them, he's not involved with them, but he can see whether they're in step, whether they're not, at what stage are they saluting, and so on. In this same way, we can observe all our thoughts and all our feelings assembled before us, flowing. And that is significantly important for us because we can use the aspect of our freedom to then insert what we want in a convenient gap. This is called spiritual practice. And so some knower of the field ultimately is there. It's not the intellect itself. We can change our mind from day to day, from moment to moment, change our decisions. We can be strong-willed or weak-willed. Spiritual life encourages us to be strong in will. And this strength in will is called tapasya, a kind of culture, a cultivating of the fields. We can use that simile language as well. The metaphorical language of field has many, many important uses. And of course, in the context of the Bhagavad, we're talking of a military field with military combat taking place. And still it's a field of action, be it military action, or be it maternal action, or clerical action, or any other kind of occupation that you have. The government offices have their action, their field of endeavor. So in the same way, we have a field of endeavor. So this is a second use that we have, not just the individual field of our own internal and external activities, but also there's the wider field, the broader field, the field of our experience, collective experience. And then there is and this field, of course, is based on a causal law. The knower of the field is separate. The knower of the field is the reviewing officer. The knower of the field is the witness. And so it is this knower that acts as a datum beyond which you cannot go. The seer can never be seen. The witness can never be witnessed. So this is the point. And is brought out, this great subtle philosophy, in an easy way. So there's the field of endeavor as well. Collective field, individual field. And Sri Krishna has no hesitation. Very quickly he tells us, I am the knower in all the fields. Only one knower. Immediately disbanding any vestige of individuality. And yet at the same time maintaining it. But our ultimate conclusion, one witness. I'm the only witness in all the fields. The remarkable conclusion he comes to. Then he's described the field in great detail, just to refresh our memories. And then, of course, the field has consequences. It has modifications. What are these modifications? They're described as various desires. Desires means we have a felt gap within that we feel we have to fill from without. Is that form of mentation that seeks repetition of the contact with the objects of the senses. And we're hooked into it because our field, as it were, is not distinguished as field and knower. We mix the two up. So the knower and the field, intrinsically being one and the same, or seem to be one and the same, we get caught up in individuality. And then hatred is mentioned. When we have a desire, it's a scene to go towards something that is fulfilling and away from something that is not. Pleasure and pain are mentioned. The aggregate is mentioned of all these experiences. And the body is like a machine that is an aggregate of all these parts. All of this is mentioned, just to refresh our memory. And how to overcome this, how to detach and make this separation between the field and the knower. All these various virtues have to be cultivated. And it's like a list for our cultivation. And we went through these last week. Humility is necessary. Every time we assert the ego or we assert our individuality, this is not being humble. And you get some people, of course, who say, me, I'm humble. Of course, that's far from it. It's like the politician who says, in my humble opinion, there's nothing humble about a politician's opinion. And then modesty in terms of actions. I did this, I did that, I do this, I do that. And non-injury in thought, word, and deed. In the slightest thought of any kind of injury in thought, and especially in word and in speech, and in any of these actions, all of these, of course, would be self-injuring. And this we don't know until we have this holistic view of things. And then we find this forbearance. Now, in modern times, relatively modern times, by the way, a great, great general, Jan Smuts, a South African general, Afrikaans man. And he was a great, great character. Unfortunately, his political survival depended on a kind of unfair racial separation, but nevertheless, he was a philosopher. He was a great military person and strategist. He was somebody of immense wisdom. And he managed to develop his own philosophy called holism. That means that the whole is greater than the parts. And if we view things in this holistic way, we'll soon realize that any injury is injury to ourselves. And forbearance right now with the COVID-19 virus, we require this strength, this forbearance, this attitude. What cannot be cured has to be endured. Uprightness, purity, right life, moral being, and service to the teacher was also mentioned, and purity in body and mind, and then, of course, steadfastness. What is the technique of purity? Of course, physical purity we know of, but the psychological, mental purity has to be there. What makes us impure? Any association with the body makes us impure. Sri Ramakrishna, in one conversation, was telling how what makes everything impure. He says, everything that comes from the mouth is impure. It's like food that you lick and then offer to somebody. The only thing that can be pure is a thought of God. That's the only thing. And asserting your own purity, your own purity in depth can be the only thing. This pure consciousness is the only thing that is pure. Anything else is tainted. The whole world is tainted. In fact, the Upanishads also say this, that, and puts it in a story form, that when something comes out, then it becomes tainted immediately. So all of these various culturing values were laid out, and it goes on dispassion towards the objects of the senses, and also absence of egoism, because egoism is the primary obstacle, and then perception of evil in birth, in death, in old age, sickness, and pain, the things that we take for granted as normal and try to avoid. We avoid pain, we avoid sickness. Unfortunately, we can't avoid old age, but we make our best efforts. And then, of course, there's death. And all of these things were noticed by Shakya Muni, the great silent one of the Shakya clan, very Gautama Siddhartha that became the Buddha. And seeing all these events in front of him, he then revised his whole thinking and wondered what was the value in life. And so then going on, unattachment, non-identification of self with all the environment and so on, constant equanimity, the current self, what is desirable, undesirable, we don't care. Whether food comes, whether food doesn't, whether cold weather comes or hot, makes no difference. Whether good fortune comes or not, or ill fortune. Equilibrium of mind in the certainty that there is a steady, poised area, as it were, in us that is called the knower. And then he mentions, and just revising from last week, unswerving devotion, he says, to me, that is a personal ideal of God. In the yoga of non-separation, resort to sequestered places for the householder from time to time, and distaste for the society of those people who are not on the same wavelength, essentially. So all of these things are there, and all of them were mentioned last week, and I'm simply refreshing your memory. And then finally, constancy in self-knowledge, perception of the end of the knowledge of truth. This is declared to be knowledge, is not the kind of standard knowledge that we began this talk with. And of course, knowledge is opposed to ignorance, and since we're suffering from ignorance, the antidote only is knowledge. That is why this chapter is important. Now, the question is, people inclined in these contaminating ways with contaminating minds, do they grow in wisdom and self-knowledge at all? We have this idea of evolution. So today a thought went out, along with an accompanying prayer, illustrating this idea, because what we call the field is actually a field of evolution. But evolution means something that unfolds from within. We are physically here. Where did it come from? At some stage or other, it wasn't like that. Different cells of the body have been changed different numbers of times. Some of them over 900 times, depending on your age. Some of them 700, some of them 200, but none of them are original. And all stemming from one small cell. That's all. How did this variety come about? This is a baffling question for biologists, particularly those who have a materialist bent of mind, because if you have no direction to it or teleology or any kind of purpose, then you'd have to say it's random chance, a spin of the roulette wheel. You're here only because somebody span a wheel. Who was it? Nature. Nature insentient had the intelligence to spin a wheel? No. It's just a story. I see. So the wheel somehow was spun and somehow arrived at against enormous odds in wonderful combinations that not only makes the entire universe run like a well-oiled machine and so precisely, but makes every entity, including the body, run in the same way. So this is all to do with the field. And the field looks as if it evolves. But if you have a kind of devilish nature, a twinkle in your eye, and somebody asks, do you believe in evolution? Then you might well say, no. I believe in a totality. I can't believe in evolution. It looks like something changes. It looks like there's space and looks like there's time. It looks like a progression, but looks like an unfolding. Now, from that point of view, you can use the language of unfolding, but only because we can't see the totality. And when we seek for the knower and finally catch this knower has the effect of removing all the parts, all the separations, all the divisions, all the space, all the time, and leaves you only with one entity. Even the language is awkward. One, a numerical value, not even one. Indescribable. And this indescribable nature we are getting close to, because how to form a description of the universe at the fundamental level has now become a problem. And so the great pioneers of quantum electrodynamics, for example, Richard Feynman, well respected, physicist, probably one of the most well-respected and the most revolutionary physicists of the 20th century, even rivaling perhaps Einstein. And he says something to the effect that no one understands quantum mechanics. Nobody understands the quantum world. If you think you understand it, you don't. This is a very, very akin to Kena Upanishad, which says, if you think you know not. See? And if you declare, I don't know, you probably know. This is a kind of language. It doesn't make any sense in the objective world. We like things cut and dried. We like things put into categories. But this does not apply at the most fundamental level of our existence. And so when we describe the field, we're only describing the field of our experience. But underneath it, we can come to more and more subtle areas. And so the modern idea of evolution has to change. That there's no randomness involved in it, because Swami Vivekananda points this out in his lectures on Jnana Yoga. That if you have evolution, you must have involution. Something must be involved and must go back to its origin. It's a very important point. And in any event, who can see the sum totality? So no one can see this totality until they've got to a position where they stand in God's throne room, on God's lap, as it were, where He Himself sits and looks from there. My question to people often is, yes, you're judging God when you like to, but well, how does God view you? Have you seen things through His eyes? Do you see the world through His eyes? He made the world and saw it was good. How is it that we see it's bad? We see it in an entirely opposite way. And so, does any good come from this knowledge of Brahman, this Brahma knowledge? And the answer has to come. Supposing that we say, well, this is all very well. But when we have knowledge of the external world, see, there's that phrase, knowledge is power. We're empowered of the entire world. Is there some kind of advantage from knowing this knower itself, as it were? And so the answer has to come. So it comes in a stanza like this, in a very important term called Nyayam. Nyayam yat tat pravakshyami yajñatva mratam ashnuti anadijmat param brahma na sat tanna saduchate. See, Nyayam has to be known. What has to be known? I shall describe that which has to be known. It's awkward language, and you'll see why. Knowing which one attains to immortality. See, the goal is immortality. Whether we think about it, whether we don't, whether we like it, whether we don't, whether we have a different theological position or not, the goal is actually immortality. This is our natural bent of mind. Everybody is looking to extend their life eternally. Nobody likes death. Everyone wants to avoid it. See the great measures about avoiding sickness in this current age, and the great concern that we have and the governments worldwide have about it. I'm not suggesting that we leave it be. I'm suggesting we do the best and alleviate the suffering where we can. But the fact of that is, we were all born, we are all living, and we all die in the language of the identification with the field. In the language of the identification with the knower, then death doesn't arise. The whole question never comes. And so to realize that is equivalent to attaining immortality. It's just a language convenience because this being our nature, we're not attaining it. But we look as if we haven't got it. You tell me it's all eternal. How is it I don't feel it? When you start feeling it, then you're making some kind of advance. So it's described in this way. Beginningless is this supreme principle called Brahman. Now, of course, the word Brahman is used in many different contexts because the root there, Brah, means to expand infinitely. In a sense, you can think if there was a big bang, you'll find you get the sense of it. See, a kind of expansion, a kind of cosmic evolution, as it were. You can get that idea, yes. And you can see how marvelously this is symbolized when you see the Sri Chakra. See the interlocking of so many different triangles, triangular forms, until finally you get this bindu in the center, this one point, and it symbolizes how it can, from this one point, expand infinitely in so many different complex ways, geometric ways. And then you see how it can go back. This whole thing can be looked at from a meditation point of view. And so we have something called Saguna Brahman. That is the Brahman with qualities. We can say this is omnipresence and omniscience and omnipotence and so on. We can say that it is the unmanifest which sits there. We can say it is that potential that evolves, that seems to unfold. Seems to, because that's our view of it. And so, this is not the Brahman that is mentioned. The Brahman that is mentioned is Param Brahma, the Supreme. So the Supreme Brahman is this. And what is its nature? Contradictory. It is Sat, it is being, it is existence. And it is Asat, it is non-existence. See? What is this world? What is a particle or a wave? At the fundamental level, the physicists will tell us this is simply a series of probability waves. We don't know where anything is. We just know where something probably is after making a huge calculation. So when we get up in the morning and have our routine and think this is a table and a chair and this is the office and this is the computer and this is my work and this is my income, this is my bank account, quantum mechanics will say, you may well think this, but we believe it's probability waves. There's nothing fixed until it's measured, is the common understanding. And so therefore it's in multi-dimensions, as it were. That is, there's no determined thing. Is it fixed in a location? Well, it's fixed in alternate locations until you look at it and then or measure it at least, and then it's in one location. Until that point, current understanding says it's in a superposition. It's in many possible different places, no fixed abode. And then you kind of bring it into context. This is a kind of nebulous, uncertain world is the fundamental world that we live in, endorsing time and time again that this world is nothing but Maya. And so that's the point. Can you say even this Maya exists? Is it existent? Is it non-existent? Same language is applied to it. You can't say it's existent. You can't say it's non-existent. The magician makes something appear, then makes something disappear. You can say in that sense it's cosmic existence and non-existence, which is true. When I look at it, it seems to exist. When it vanishes, it doesn't. And that is why we have this firm philosophical argumentation about not just one state of consciousness, but three states of consciousness are there. When one, it disappears and all the events in it, another one comes on the scene. No visa required. And then when all that goes, some blank thing is there. So it's both being and it's non-being. And this Saguna Brahman is immanent in Prakriti, in nature. And in that state, all the contradictions and conflicts meet in that state, in him. So in the relative existence, the immortality of even the devas, even the gods, even the subtle beings, and the death of the human beings emanated from this one Brahman, which is Saguna Brahman, that is nature itself. manifest aspects with variation in these three gunas, this interplay of these evolutionary forces are there. And this is existence, Sat. And his unmanifest aspect in which the three gunas disappear in equilibrium, nothing happening. You can only say something is happening when something tremors. When something moves and a contrast is made, then you can say, it seems to exist. But at that point, no, asat, non-existence. This is very baffling. Because some people demand, materialists who demand, can you please give us evidence for something that seems not to be there? And the counter-argument is, can you give evidence? Because this universe does not seem to be there when you boil it down. When you take energy, divided it into gravitational energy and electrical energy, and it all equals out, comes to nothing. When you take matter and antimatter, it all comes to nothing. So how do you get something from nothing? How do you get existence from non-existence? The truth is, it's not non-existent, despite the fact that you can't trace it or see it. But this is Saguna Brahman. In the near Guna Brahman, no modifications are there of any kinds. The manifest state and the unmanifest state, they don't apply to that. You can't describe such a thing. And yet, Sri Krishna is saying, I shall describe. But this is a different kind of description. It's not saying, this is how we measure it. These are the dimensions. This is the divine fax number we can use, or email. Not like that. So defined by a very obscure way. It's asat and sat together. And it goes on. So this supreme state is to be realized in intuition. This is nirikalpa samadhi, where, in Ramakrishna's example, the salt doll disappears into the ocean, never to return. But it still doesn't answer the question, what is the benefit of such a thing? And so, that Jivatman who intuits this Brahma Nirvana gets merged in Brahman. And then immortality. This is the benefit. The benefit is immortality, not annihilation. People are frightened by this and think it's annihilation only because we are used to this body and the environment, the playground that this body operates in. So Akhanda Brahman can be experienced in samadhi only. And what follows, of course, is all silence. One thought that we gave the other day was on silence, inquiring to the nature of this, what is described as knower and feels, Purusha and Prakriti, knowledge and ignorance, all these cogitations, they all come to an end. Everything comes to an end. That means beatitude alone persists. And there the position of the Jivatman is the same as that of a salt doll, incapable of surviving a sea bath. That's the story. A salt doll went, what is the ocean like? As soon as it dives in, it gets all disintegrated. Then an interesting theological question can arise. All these great saints and sages, how is it they didn't disappear? How is it they came back? Sacrificing their salt doll moment, they decided, let us come back and elevate the whole of humanity. Now, what is the plenitude that the sadhaka enjoys before this mergence in Brahman? We can describe this using that same example of the salt doll as this ocean of immortality. So the next stanza will tell us about the effect of evolving in wisdom. There are 3 stanzas connected with this. And of course, this is all gathered from strands that we find there in the Upanishads. If this Bhagavad Gita does not agree with the Upanishads and itself declares itself Upanishad, chapter after chapter of chapter, that this is an Upanishad, So we find these strands. This next stanza we find in a different number of locations. One of the locations will be in the at least 2 or 3 of the Upanishads. So with hands and feet everywhere. And even here in the Bhagavad Gita, we found it already. So it goes like this. Sarvataha panipadam tat sarvato kshiro mukham. Sarvata shrutimalloke sarvam avritya tishtati. With hands and feet. Sarvataha, everywhere. With eyes and head and mouths, everywhere. You get a glimpse of this in the 11th chapter. We have this cosmic vision also. With ears everywhere. He exists enveloping all. The opening part of the Upanishad is there. Ishavasham idam sarvam yatkinch jagat jam jagat. That being covers everywhere. So enveloping everywhere. Now we find, not only in this description, we find now a meditation. We can easily sit down and understand. Having said something that is almost inconceivable, that is both existent and non-existent, we get the existent side of it. And now we find wherever we look, all limbs are his. And when we say hands and feet, we are not just looking at human hands and feet. Mammals have hands and feet, but also every other organism in the universe has some kind of limbs. Even a simple organism such as a virus will have certain limbs that match on, certain sticking out entities, something like a landmine, if you like, with, like these sea mines that you see with spikes. And you'll find they're looking for some fitting, some keyhole that they can fit their key in. So we can say that metaphorically and literally, it's the Lord of the universe that has hands and feet everywhere. It's not that the transcendent entity has any hands and feet. No hands, no feet, no mind, no characteristics. But at the Saguna level, that is at the universal level, we find all these limbs everywhere. Now the key and the art is to recognize it. When I started conducting yoga exercises, it was a little awkward for a monk because many of the people there are of different genders, men, women, and so on. So these passages assist. Instead of seeing people, say, Lord, your limbs are here. There's your leg there. Another arm is there. A head is there. See, a finger is there. A foot is there. An ankle is there. All of them belong to thee. Not only there, but also here. And so, exists enveloping all. A wonderful concept. See, a river assumes the characteristics of the sea. You can't distinguish. You can't say that there's any difference between the water that flows in Africa, say from the Zambezi River, and the water that's flowing over the Victoria Falls, and the water that's going to Cobora Bassa. Now, if you don't know the geography, you use a different geography. So let's say the water that is going from Lake Erie, if you use North America now as an example. Lake Erie, you can't say it's a different thing to Niagara Falls and then beyond. No, water is water. And so the river assumes the characteristics actually of the sea as it flows in its proximity there as well. And also in the same way, before the Jivatman merges into Guna Brahman, before the salt doll walks into the water, he gets a panoramic view and realization of Ishvara, the highest, the God, the highest reading of the Absolute is called Ishvara, and he gets a panoramic view, looking on the one side at the Nirguna, And on the other side, the glory of all the manifestations. All seeing. This vision comes, this experience comes firsthand. And so while the multitudinous beings seem to have their own individualities, it's all an illusion. They're actually part and parcel of a cosmic entity. One entity and one cosmic mind also. My first silly question to a teacher of mine, my wonderful teacher in Zimbabwe, a childish question asked as a teenager. Tell me about, telepathy. How does this work? And he didn't spurn my question. He said, oh, you see, there's only one mind. It's like one broadcasting station, and we can tune into it. And when two people tune into it simultaneously, we call this telepathy. That explanation was so simple and yet so profound, because it had never occurred to me. Only one cosmic entity is there. There's nothing outside the pale of this Ishvara. And not even an atom, not one atom can move independent of that. We've now gone beyond the atomic level. If you ask, what are the subatomic components? What is the definition of electron? Electron is a kind of oscillation, a kind of vibration in Hilbert space. That's all. It has no meaning to say anything like that. It's something that we have no idea about. But we can see the effects. We can see that there is a certain energy. We can measure the electron. But can we see it? No. But not even that can oscillate. There can be no movement, even at the quantum level, even at the most subtle level. There can be no movement. And that subtle level is a vibration. And what we say, of course, is that vibration comes from a cosmic vibration whose sound we represent as Om. One Supreme Purusha puts on the role of the innumerable. Just as we say we have a body, so also the cosmic entity that we call a God, his whole body is the entire universe. So Sri Ramakrishna has this to say: as long as there is a trace of egoism in me, a trace of agency and profiteer, a trace of identity with the body, is what he's saying. As long as there is a trace of that, I see Ishvara as the owner of the universe and all the beings in it. In other words, it's that trace of egoism that's stopping me from going into the ocean completely. And so that trace of egoism is necessary. Without that, how can a person teach? How can a person engage in the world and be useful? How can a person play the role? So it's a wonderful position to be in. And this is the position that Ramakrishna held, sitting there, stepping occasionally one foot into the absolute, and then the other foot in humankind, and being able to withdraw at will. This is the mark, of course, of a special entity that we call avatar. Sarvendriya Guna Bhasam Savendriya Vivarchitam Asaktam Savabrachai Vanir Gunam Guna Bhuktracha. Shining by all the functions of the senses, yet without the senses. The absolute, yet sustaining all, devoid of gunas and qualities, yet experiencing them. Don't forget, we are finding out what is the nature now of this supreme knower. The knower can witness all of these things without being engaged, and yet the absence of this entity will make everything else collapse. The proximity of it makes it run, shining by the functions of all the senses. How do we know it's there? Because the eyes shine, because the ears hear, all the senses operate. When the eyes don't shine, it means that entity that's sustaining it is absent from it. Why do the eyes shine? It's because God is shining, and the eyes happen to be the avenues through which we catch the rays. Yet that absolute has no senses, no mind, no limbs, sustaining everything and devoid of all these evolutionary forces that we call gunas. And yet he experiences it. The example, of course, is sunlight enables us to see many colorful forms in their true perspective. And so it can be said that sunlight reveals itself as a kind of interpreter of all the forms and colors. Now we have to use apparitional language. While apparently assuming forms and hues, the sunlight itself is not in itself with form and color. It just lightens the other thing. It's unattached to all these modifications. We can't see the photons, but by means of the photons, we can see. Chaitanya, or consciousness, which is the characteristic of this Atman. We said it is existence, now we say it is also consciousness, plays a role. And the role is similar to that of the sunlight. So consciousness itself lights up the senses and helps them, assists them to function. That is why we say, I'm the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, see like that. If you want to find it out, it's that which is within, not something above in the sky ruling from the clouds. This is the great, great step that all mystics have to take. It's this inward step where we understand it is the intimate, innermost subtle entity in your own being. So it lights up the senses. It aids them to function in their respective functional areas. And Brahman, or the absolute awareness, is also therefore known as, it's described in special terms as Chidakasha. Chidakasha is mental space. Mahakasha, physical space. But this is Chidakasha. It's a substratum to everything. And like cinema pictures, you have something projected on a screen. Without the screen, you can't see the pictures. So acting like a substratum there, like a screen on which all these pictures are projected. The pictures don't get their colors from the screen. And the screen is not affected by the colors in the example. And still the screen helps the pictures appear. And in the same way, the three evolutionary forces are not in that absolute Brahman. But all the same, Brahman aids the gunas to shine in their own colors. So the awareness of the gunas is possible only because of this substratum, this background that we call Brahman. And that is all awareness. It's not a non-aware thing. It's a consciousness itself. Now, Sri Ramakrishna has this very interesting thing to say. He says both the aspects, that is, with the form and without the form, they belong to the same entity. We can call it God. A lot of people don't like this word God because it comes with much baggage for many people. Nevertheless, since it's universally used, why shouldn't we use it? And faith in the one implies faith in the other. Like fire and its heating. And fire and its heating property, they can't be separated. And yet they are separate. And the sun and the sunbeams, these are inseparable. And milk and its whiteness are inseparable. And in the same way, the Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman are one and the same. Not possible to conceive of one to the exclusion of the other. And when one is in a witnessing position, it's completely unaffected. But what it's witnessing is its own manifestation. And so we can say without and within all beings, the unmoving and also the moving, because of his subtlety, he is incomprehensible. He is far and he is near. And you say, where is God located? Far and near. This is echoed, of course, again in the Upanishads. Bahe antas cha bhutanam acharam charam evacha Sukshma tvam tad avidnyayam durastam cha nityeka cha tat. Without and within all beings, the unmoving, that is the acharam, the unmoving, and also the charam, the moving. And why don't we notice it? Because of its subtlety, its sukshmatvat, because of its subtlety, he is what? Incomprehensible. This avidnyayam, unknowable, is incomprehensible. And what is he? Antike cha tat. He is far, that is darshtam, and also cha, antike near. See, the question comes, how is cosmic consciousness, how does it remain undivided to be understood just through a few examples? So we can understand it in this way. In a block of ice that is immersed in the sea, water is present inside it and outside it. Again, what we call agashya, matter and space, it remains undivided in and through all things, with form or formless. So in the same way, what we call the Paramatman is all-pervading and undivided by the manifest forms. There's a movement on the surface of the sea where it is all stillness at the bottom. And there is also movement in Paramatman when it's modified as the Prakriti. And so to use the simile gives us an understanding of it. So as Guna Brahman, he's all stillness, nothing, no movement, nothing, no distinguishing characteristics. The seawater transformed into vapor becomes subtle and invisible. There's a drama that is played out. Wonderful drama that acts as a great subject for meditation. The sea is there, and because of the heat from the sun, evaporation takes place, and it forms clouds in this drama. And then, once it's gotten a certain pressure, we find it come as rainfall, and it doesn't end there. That rainfall comes, it gives sustenance to plants, and we munch and crunch on the plants, and gives us life, and so the cycle continues. And the water sustains us with over 70% of body mass. So, Nirguna Brahman, who is all awareness and all intelligence, remains incomprehensible to those who have not purified the mind. That's the key. What is the whole of spiritual endeavor? Just purifying the mind, cleaning the mind, using every opportunity to promote sattva. What is tapasya? Promoting sattva at every opportunity. So to the ignorant people, even those who have a religious temperament, that God is far away, seems far away. And even when you're not thinking of God, when the mind is occupied with everything else, still to you, that God is far away. That God is near and nearer than breathing, because he's the innermost self. And constant awareness of this is knowledge. Practicing the presence of God in every moment. And where forgetfulness occurs, practicing the art of bringing the attention back. Now Ramakrishna says this: the symptoms of egoism are found in the one come down from samadhi to wakefulness. Such an enlightened one sees himself in all beings and the universe at the various manifestations of Ishvara. That's the effect. The effect is having gotten this understanding, this knowledge, with eyes open, everything everywhere is just that same Ishvara, that same Lord. Where there is egoism in you, there is no alternative to your holding Ishvara as with form. In the beginning, you use form, but ultimately that form will dissolve automatically into this by itself, effortlessly, because the Nirguna Brahman cannot be comprehended by the embodied one. That means somebody who has a sense of embodiment. Again, the Saguna Brahman is not a fiction of the mind. You may say, if the salt all goes into the ocean, and if that absolute is the only thing that exists that is devoid of Maya, when this Maya all dissolves, that's all that remains, then is this Saguna Brahman, this personal God, is it also an illusion? No. This Saguna Brahman is not a fiction of the mind, and every mystic will attest to that. That God can be seen, God can be heard, God can be spoken to, God can be listened to. It's not a fiction of the mind. The body and mind in the world may be viewed just as mere projections. But Ishvara, or the Saguna Brahman, is as real as the Nirguna Brahman, because you cannot say that it is existent or non-existent. It is inscrutable. That's the point. And so it goes on, but it's now 9 o'clock. It goes on to tell us from 16 to 17 that this one is appearing as the many. There's a profound philosophy in this 13th chapter. The other chapters, in a sense, can be a little simpler, but this is where the real Upanishadic philosophy lies. And what's the practical application for this? Supposing I now get accustomed to seeing this whole world as nothing more than seemingly fragmented God, my whole approach will change. My whole character will change. My whole service to humanity will change. So this is the practical dimension of these important chapters. So we leave off. Next week we'll commence with 16th chapter or 16th stanza of this 13th chapter. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all, and peace especially in loving blessings to those in all those countries that are particularly suffering at this time. My thoughts particularly for Italy, France, USA, and China, and other places suffering, of course.